I am Robert, an IT engineer with over 10 years of experience, respected by everyone for my dedication and sense of responsibility. In the eyes of my colleagues and friends, I have a perfect life, a stable job, a cozy home, and a wife I thought were everything to me. But sometimes, life isn't always what it seems. It was a Friday evening, and I was sitting in my office, feeling satisfied after closing a major deal with a leading corporation. The deal not only secured the company's financial future, but also opened up the possibility of a raise, which I thought would help Jennifer and I realize our dream of starting a family. Little did I know at the time that these peaceful moments would quickly evaporate. As I was about to shut down my computer and leave the office, a new email notification popped up in the corner of my screen. It was an anonymous email with no subject line or sender information. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a short message. Robert, you need to know the truth. The attached video will explain it better. I paused for a few seconds, my heart pounding in my chest. I scrolled down and saw an attachment with the name Brad_Jennifer.mp4. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself before clicking open the video file. The scene that appeared on the screen stunned me. Jennifer, my wife of 5 years, was intimate with Brad, my boss. In the house where I'd once trusted our loyalty, every emotion flooded me at once: pain, anger, and utter betrayal. I paused the video, but the image was seared into my mind. I gasped, feeling a sharp pain in my chest. At that moment, I wondered if this was real. Was I imagining things? Or was this some kind of cruel joke? But no, it was so obvious, from Brad's smile to Jennifer's eyes, that none of it was fake. I replayed the video, this time paying closer attention. The scene didn't stop with Brad and Jennifer. In the final seconds, there were other faces. People I knew, colleagues at work, people I had once called friends. The second shock hit me as I realized that this wasn't just an affair. This was a web of betrayal, and Jennifer, the woman I had loved, seemed to be at the center of it all. I clicked off the video and sank into my chair. My mind was spinning, questions racing. How could this happen? Why would Jennifer do this? And how could Brad, the man I devoted everything to helping the company grow, betray me like this? I remembered the little signs I'd missed. Jennifer had been distant, making excuses to go out, avoiding my eyes when we talked. I thought it was just work stress or everyday struggles, but now all the signs were coming together like a complete picture, and it was killing me inside. Just then, my phone vibrated. It was Jennifer. I stared at the screen, wondering if I should answer. Finally, I pressed the answer button, and her voice rang out cheerfully. "Honey, how was your day? Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "Fine," I said shortly, my voice dry. "How are you?" "I'm fine." "Oh, Brad's having a little staff party tomorrow, so I thought I'd help out as a waitress for a few hours. You okay?" Her words were like a punch to the gut. How could she talk about Brad so casually, right after what I'd just seen? I tried to suppress my emotions, my voice becoming colder. "It's okay, but be careful." "Thank you. I love you." I didn't respond. When she hung up, I clutched the phone in my hand so tightly, it felt like it might shatter under the pressure. Her words echoed in my head, but they were now lies. I sat there for a long time, feeling everything around me grow heavy. But instead of letting the pain consume me, I decided to stand up. If Jennifer, Brad, and the others thought I would just sit there and suffer, they were wrong. I looked back at the computer screen, the blue light illuminating my determined face. "They want to play? Fine," I told myself. "But this time, I'll be the one to make the rules." As I sat alone in my office that evening, memories of Jennifer and our happy times played back to me like a slow-motion movie. I remembered the day we first met at a friend's gathering. Jennifer was a smart, charming girl with a radiant smile that could light up the room. I was instantly drawn to her. We quickly became close, and after just a few months of dating, I knew she was the person I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. Our marriage started off well. Jennifer always knew how to make me feel loved and appreciated. Dinners cooking, laughing while watching movies, and weekend trips were always filled with joy. We had so many plans: buying a bigger house, starting a family, and building a future together. She often told me I was the best man she had ever met, and I always believed that our love was an unshakable fortress. But maybe I'm wrong. The first signs of a change in Jennifer came a few months ago, after I returned from a camping trip with Brad and the team. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Jennifer seemed to be busier with work and the advanced classes she was taking. She spent less time at home, and when she was home, she became quiet and distant. I thought she might be tired from the pressure of work, so I tried not to bother her. But then the changes became more obvious. Jennifer began to find excuses to go out more often, sometimes for just a few hours, sometimes for the whole evening. The reasons she gave, meeting friends, studying in groups, attending work events, were reasonable. But I couldn't help but feel that something was off. She also began to avoid eye contact when we spoke, often ending the conversation awkwardly. One time, while I was doing the laundry, I noticed a strange scent on her clothes. Not Jennifer's perfume, but a strong, unfamiliar scent that made me stop and think. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but the signs kept piling up. Jennifer also began to develop new habits that I'd never seen before. She spent more time on her phone, and whenever I approached her, she would quickly put her phone down or switch to another app. Once I accidentally saw her smile while reading a text, but when I asked her, she just said, "It's nothing, just a friend." Her voice was soft, but I sensed an avoidance in her eyes. These little signs were like cracks in the wall of our marriage. I tried to find reasons not to doubt, to convince myself that Jennifer was just under pressure, but the doubts grew, eating away at the trust I once had in her. One evening, while Jennifer was out meeting friends, I sat in the living room, staring at my phone. My anxiety was making it impossible to sit still. I told myself that I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. And that's when I decided to act. My cynicism had reached its limit. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. One night, when Jennifer said she was going to a study group with her friends, I decided not to sit idly by. I needed to know the truth. I started by hiring a private investigator. The investigator, Charles, had been recommended by a friend who was going through a complicated divorce. During our first meeting, I felt both embarrassed and hurt to admit that I had doubts about my wife. Charles didn't say much, but he made practical and effective suggestions. He advised me to start by installing a tracking app on Jennifer's phone and a small tracking device in her car. At first, I hesitated. The thought of invading my wife's privacy overwhelmed me, but the images from the video I received haunted me. I had no choice. Over the next few weeks, I kept a close watch. The car trackers showed that Jennifer was frequently traveling to strange locations. Some nights she would say she was working overtime or studying, but the GPS signal would point to a house in the suburbs where I didn't know anyone. I wrote down every detail, every specific time, hoping that it was all a misunderstanding. But the more information I gathered, the more certain I was that my fears were coming true. One day, Charles contacted me, saying he had some photos. He asked me to meet him in person. When I got to his office, Charles handed me a folder containing clear photos. Jennifer walking into a restaurant with Brad. They were sitting together, talking intimately, and making unmistakable gestures. But that wasn't the worst of it. Charles pointed to another photo in which Jennifer was not only with Brad, but with another man, one of my former colleagues, whom I had once considered a friend. I didn't know what to do when I saw the photos. Everything inside me collapsed. Anger and betrayal suffocated me. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice shaking. Charles just nodded, his eyes sympathetic. "I found more than that," he said, opening another folder containing Jennifer's call records. During those calls, Jennifer spoke to Brad in a tone I had never heard before, cheerful, relaxed, and full of hidden meanings. She laughed and told him about the times I was too busy to notice what was going on. In one conversation, Brad said, "We should be more careful, or Robert will find out." Jennifer just laughed and replied, "He trusts me. Robert never suspects anything." Those words were like a knife stabbing into my heart. After my meeting with Charles, I returned home in a bad mood. That night, Jennifer came home late as usual. She walked in with a fake smile and asked me about my day at work, as if nothing was wrong. I tried to keep my cool, looking at her without giving anything away. But deep down, I knew everything had changed. The woman in front of me was no longer the Jennifer I'd loved. I started paying closer attention to her actions. One time, while she was in the shower, I opened her phone and saw messages from Brad. The messages contained no explicit content, just emojis and a few ambiguous words, but they were enough to confirm my suspicions. I felt like a lost soul in my own home, every corner filled with lies. But I knew that suspicion and anger alone wouldn't solve the problem. I needed action, and I needed more evidence. I contacted Charles and asked him to follow up with Jennifer in the coming days. He promised to send a more detailed report, including photos and videos if possible. During the days of waiting, I lived in a state of extreme stress. Jennifer seemed unaware that anything was wrong. She continued her routine, going to work, coming home late, making excuses about being busy. As for me, every time I saw her, I felt torn between the anger that I wanted to confront her immediately and the pain of realizing that I could no longer trust this woman. A few days later, Charles called me back, saying he had everything I needed. I met him at a deserted coffee shop where he handed me a USB drive containing the video. "Robert, I think you need to prepare yourself," he said, his eyes serious. I didn't respond, just took the USB drive and went home. That night in my office, I played the video. What I saw not only confirmed my suspicions, but also disgusted me. Not only was Jennifer with Brad, but she was also in situations with other people. Faces I knew well from the company. They had not only betrayed me, but had made Jennifer part of a sick game. I turned off the video and sat silently in the darkness. The anger and pain that was rising up inside me threatened to consume me. But underneath it all, a strong will began to form. I was no longer passive. I couldn't let them continue. They thought they had won, but they were wrong. I would bring them all to justice, no matter the cost. I spent the night thinking about it after watching the video on the USB drive Charles gave me. The feeling of betrayal still burned inside me, but instead of letting anger consume me, I decided I needed a clear plan. Confronting Jennifer directly without proper preparation would only make things worse. I needed her to confess, needed her to come clean. The next day, Jennifer came home late, as usual. I was already sitting in the living room, the lights dimmed to add to the heavy atmosphere. She walked in looking tired, but trying to fake a smile. "How was your day?" "I'm so tired. It's been a long day," she said, trying to sound casual. I stared at her, not answering right away. My gaze made her pause for a moment. "Jennifer, I want to talk," I said, my voice lower and firmer than usual. "What's wrong?" "You look stressed," she asked, hastily putting her bag away in the corner. I gestured toward the sofa, motioning for her to sit down. "I've been thinking a lot lately. Something's not right between us, and I want to make it clear," I said, my eyes never leaving hers. Jennifer tried for a small smile, but the worry was evident in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I don't understand," she replied, her voice defensive. I leaned back, folding my arms. "I want you to tell me about Brad. All those nights you said you were working or studying. Where were you really, Jennifer?" Her face paled instantly. "Brad?" she repeated, as if the name were a huge surprise. "I don't know what you mean. I just work with him like normal." I leaned forward, my voice growing harsher. "Stop lying. I know where you've been. I know what you've done. Tell me the truth, Jennifer." Jennifer paled, her hands clasped together as if she was trying to hide something. But instead of confessing, she reacted in a way I didn't expect. "Are you doubting me? What have I done to you to treat me like this?" Her voice rose, carrying a hint of defiance. I stood up, not wanting to let her talk me out of it. "I saw it all, Jennifer. Don't think I don't know. I have proof. Do you want me to open it right in front of you?" Jennifer was silent. The defiance in her voice began to fade. She bowed her head, her hands shaking. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. But the fear was evident in every word. I took a deep breath, trying to control my anger. "Jennifer, I loved you. I trusted you. And this is how you respond? Do you know how much it ruins everything?" Jennifer looked at me, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. But instead of explaining or confessing, she just said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." Those words were like another stab to my heart. "You don't want to hurt me? What about what you did to Brad? To others? You think I'll never know?" She hiccuped, trying to say something, but no words came out. I stood there, waiting for an explanation, an answer, but there was only silence and tears. Jennifer, I said, my voice low, this is your last chance. Either you tell the truth, or I will find out for myself. After I left the living room, the atmosphere in the house became stifling. I walked into the study and closed the door, but the silence from outside seemed to weigh heavily on me. I wondered if she would come and explain, or if everything would continue to be in darkness. But instead, Jennifer knocked on the door, her voice trembling. Robert, we need to talk. I turned my chair around and looked at her standing in the doorway with red eyes. She was no longer the confident, graceful figure I had loved. Instead, she was a woman filled with fear, as if she was carrying a sin on her shoulders that she could no longer hide. Finally ready? I said, my voice cold. Sit down and talk. Jennifer walked in and sat down across from me. She bowed her head, not daring to look me in the eye. Robert, I don't know where to begin, she said, her voice choking. Start with Brad, I interrupted. Why did you betray me? Why him? She clenched her fists, her breath ragged. It's not what you think, she whispered. Brad, he wasn't just your boss. He used me. I felt anger rising. Used you? Please, Jennifer, don't play the victim. I saw it all. The pictures, the videos. Don't tell me you didn't do it willingly. She looked up, tears rolling down her cheeks. At first, he just wanted to talk. And then, he forced me. He said if I didn't listen, he would make me lose my job, destroy everything I had built. I froze, a sense of confusion rising. I didn't want to believe her, but Jennifer's choked voice and panicked eyes made me listen. And you listened to him? You did all that because he threatened you? Jennifer shook her head. That's not all. Brad didn't just threaten me. He had hidden videos. He said if I didn't do what he wanted, he would send them to the school where I taught, to my friends, to my family. I didn't know what to do, Robert. I was so scared. I sat in silence, Jennifer's words cutting deeper into my mind, but I couldn't let myself get carried away. Then why didn't you tell me? Why did you let this drag on? Don't you trust me to protect you? Jennifer choked up. I was scared. I thought if I told you, you would leave me. And then, it would get worse. I stared at her, trying to read whether she was telling the truth or just making up a story to justify herself. But part of me was starting to realize that things might be more complicated than I thought. What about the others? I asked, my voice firm. Don't tell me it's just Brad. Jennifer flinched, panic clear in her eyes. Robert, I don't know what to say. Brad, he dragged other people into it. He forced me to attend his parties, and I had no choice. I narrowed my eyes, trying to keep my composure. No choice? Jennifer, don't you realize what you've done? Not only have you betrayed me, but you've also given him complete control over you. Do you think you can get away with this without consequences? Jennifer didn't answer. She hung her head, her shoulders shaking. I know I was wrong. I tried to get out, but the deeper I got, the more I didn't know what to do. Robert, I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Her apology, however sincere, did nothing to assuage my anger. I needed time to process it all, to decide what to do next. Get out, I said, my voice icy. I need to be alone. Jennifer looked at me for a moment, as if she wanted to say something more, but in the end she just walked out quietly. The door closed, leaving me alone with my pain and confusion. I stared at my desk, where the evidence of Jennifer's betrayal was scattered. I didn't know what to believe anymore, but one thing was clear. This wasn't the end. If Brad thought he could get away with this, he was wrong. As Jennifer left the room, I sat alone in the dark, a mixture of anger and humiliation. She had admitted some of the truth, but not all of it. I knew that. The evidence Charles had gathered was far more compelling than she had admitted. She said she was controlled, but in the videos and photos I saw, her willingness was clear on every face. This was not just betrayal, but cooperation with the person who had destroyed my life. I could not let it end like this. I decided to turn my attention to Brad. He was the source of it all, and he would pay. I contacted Charles the next morning. I need more, I said over the phone, my voice low and determined. More evidence on Brad, not just his relationship with Jennifer, but what he did in the company. I know he's dirty. Charles agreed, and we made a detailed plan. He began to dig deeper into Brad's activities, from company finances to personal relationships. I also quietly gathered information. As an IT guy, I knew how to mine data without leaving a trace. I accessed the company's internal files, checked Brad's emails, and looked for anything unusual. It didn't take long for me to find out. Brad wasn't just a traitor, he was a fraud. I discovered in the financial records that he had used company funds to throw lavish parties and rent expensive homes for private meetings. He had also transferred large sums of money into his personal accounts, which was clearly against the law. I printed out everything I found and sent it to Charles. He discovered even more horrifying things. Brad had a secret society within the company where he and some of his colleagues regularly held debauch parties. Jennifer was just one of many victims he used to satisfy himself and please this group. This information not only disgusted me, but also strengthened my resolve. Brad had not only destroyed my marriage, but he had also used his power to manipulate others and break the law. I knew I couldn't confront him directly, but if I played it right, he would have no way out. I took all the evidence to Lydia, my lawyer. As she looked through the documents, I could see the surprise on her face. "Robert, this isn't just a normal divorce," she said. "We can sue Brad for sabotage and even take him to court for financial fraud. But you have to be prepared. It's going to be a long fight." I nodded. "I'm ready. I don't just want to get out of this. I want Brad to lose everything." After discussing it with Lydia, we agreed to attack Brad from both the personal and the legal front. Lydia began drafting a lawsuit against Brad for alienation of affection, an uncommon but legal lawsuit in my state. This would be the first step toward making his actions public. At the same time, I contacted an investigative reporter Charles had recommended. This reporter had experience uncovering corporate scandals, and I was convinced that Brad would not be able to withstand the pressure of public opinion. When everything was ready, I waited for the right moment to act. But soon, Brad discovered something. Maybe he realized something was wrong in the company, or received information from someone. He came to my office one day, knocked on the door as if nothing had happened. "Robert, can we talk for a moment?" Brad said, his expression calm but his eyes searching. I nodded, trying to keep calm. "Okay, come in." He closed the door and walked in, sitting down across from me with a forced smile. "Robert, I hear you've been busy lately. Is there anything I should know?" His voice was soft, but there was tension in it. I looked at him, trying to keep my face calm despite my turmoil. "It's nothing, Brad. Work's fine. How about you? How's everything going?" I replied, trying to turn my defense into an offense. Brad frowned, but kept his smile tight. "Of course, everything is fine. But I get the feeling you're looking into something unrelated to work. I hope I'm wrong." I smiled, cool but restrained. "Brad, if you think I'm doing something wrong, just say so. I'm always willing to be transparent." He looked at me intently, the confidence in his eyes seemingly wavering. "Okay, I just want to say, if you're thinking about doing something bad to me, you should think carefully. I don't want things to get tense between us." I leaned forward, looking him straight in the eye. "Brad, I don't need to think. What you did will have consequences, and I will make sure of that. For now, I think our conversation ends here." He stood up, his expression completely changed, no longer pretending to be friendly. "You will regret it, Robert," he said, his voice low and menacing before leaving the room. Soon after that confrontation, Lydia filed a lawsuit, and I worked with an investigative reporter to publicize Brad's scandal. Within a week, the first story appeared on the front page of a major newspaper. The headline read, "It CEO accused of using company funds for illegal activities." The article not only detailed Brad's financial fraud, but also alluded to his debauched parties. Major clients began to pull out, and the company's stock plummeted. Brad called me after the article was published. "What did you do, Robert?" he yelled into the phone, his voice filled with anger and panic. I replied calmly, "I only did the right thing, Brad. You will be held responsible for everything you did." Brad was silent for a few seconds, then lowered his voice, trying to negotiate. "We can work it out, Robert. I'll give you some money. Just drop everything." I chuckled. "No, Brad. Money can't buy back my dignity or my honor. This won't stop until you lose it all." This war was not just between Brad and me. As the evidence became public, many employees in the company also stood up to denounce his wrongdoings. Some colleagues who had attended his parties were also investigated. Brad's betrayal and corruption not only destroyed my marriage, but also shook the entire system he had built. During the investigation, Charles discovered that Brad had not only manipulated Jennifer and her employees, but had also used a false name to conceal numerous assets and illegal transactions. This opened up a new opportunity to bring him to court not only with civil charges, but also criminal charges. After the expose about Brad spread, things began to fall apart quickly. The company I'd worked for became the focus of investigations. Major clients withdrew contracts. Angry shareholders demanded Brad's resignation. I could feel his payback coming, but at the same time, these events prepared me for the worst. Brad was the type of person who would not go down without a fight, and I knew he would not let this end easily. As for Jennifer, our relationship became colder than ever. After the night she confessed about Brad, I barely spoke to her beyond what was necessary. Jennifer tried to engage me in conversation, cried, and even apologized, but things between us were no longer meaningful. Part of me felt sorry for her, but mostly the anger and betrayal were still there. One evening, Jennifer suddenly asked to talk. I sat there, expressionless, waiting for her to speak. But instead of the usual apologies, Jennifer had a different look on her face, blank and scared. "Robert, I have something to tell you," she began, her voice small and shaky. I raised my eyebrows, waiting. "Go ahead," I replied, keeping my voice cool. Jennifer took a deep breath, then blurted out a truth that stunned me. I have HIV. Time seemed to stop. I felt frozen, her words echoing in my head like a thunderclap from a clear sky. I couldn't believe my ears. Jennifer continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. I think it was Brad, or someone on his team. I don't know for sure, but I got tested, and it was positive. I couldn't say anything. Her words crushed any remaining emotion inside me. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice cold. "About a week ago," she confessed. "I didn't dare tell you. I was scared. Afraid? Afraid of what, Jennifer? Afraid that I'll find out? Afraid that I'll see the consequences of what you've done?" I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. Anger flared, but also terror. "What about me? Did you think about the possibility that I might be infected too? Or are you just concerned about yourself?" Jennifer burst into tears. "I didn't mean to, Robert. I didn't think it would come to this. I never wanted you to get hurt." But those words only made me angrier. I walked out of the room, leaving Jennifer slumped in her chair. I needed space to think, to process the shock she had just thrown into my life. I stepped outside, breathing in the cool evening air to try to calm my anger. But inside my head, everything was a mess. Jennifer had admitted to having HIV, a cruel consequence of her own misdeeds. And now I was faced with the terrifying truth. I might be a victim too. The thought made me shudder, but I knew I had to act immediately. The next morning, I went to the hospital to get tested. Waiting for the results was like sitting on fire. Those hours seemed like a century. When the doctor called my name, I stood up with shaking legs. After a few minutes of examination and conversation, the doctor said in a calm voice, "Your results are negative. You are not infected." I breathed a sigh of relief, but it was only momentary. Anger quickly replaced it, because I knew Jennifer had put me in this situation. And more than that, Brad, the man behind it all, was still out there. I couldn't let him get away. When I got home, Jennifer was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red from crying. I said nothing, just gave her a cold look. "My test is negative," I said shortly. "I'll be sending you divorce papers in a few days. Be prepared." Jennifer choked up. "Robert, please. I don't want to lose you. I know I'm wrong, but I love you. I need you." I shook my head, feeling a void wash over me. "Jennifer, love doesn't exist where there's betrayal, and I can't live with someone who destroyed everything we had." I turned and left, but before leaving the house, I added one last sentence. "Take care of yourself. This is all I can do for you." Meanwhile, things with Brad continued to escalate. The articles about him became more scathing. Financial investigations and accusations began to pile up. But what I didn't expect was that tragedy would strike sooner than I could have imagined. A week later, I got a call from Jennifer's mother, Elizabeth. Her voice was shaking and panicked. "Robert, Brad, he killed Jennifer." I was stunned. "What did you say?" I asked, not believing what I'd just heard. "Brad, he went to Jennifer after he found out she was HIV positive. They had an argument, and then he shot her," she said, choking back sobs. "Then he shot himself. The police said it was a murder-suicide." I hung up the phone, feeling like my whole world had collapsed. Jennifer, the person I once loved, was gone. Even though she betrayed me, even though she made a mistake, this ending was too cruel. And Brad, he not only destroyed my marriage, but also took the life of my ex-wife. I went to Elizabeth's house soon after to comfort her and Jennifer's family. When I saw her pained face, I realized that no matter what Jennifer had done, she was still their daughter, and their pain was now partly my responsibility. A few days later, I attended Jennifer's funeral. Standing at her grave, I didn't know what to feel: anger, sadness, or emptiness. I just knew that, no matter what happened, Jennifer had been an important part of my life. I bowed my head and said softly, "I forgive you, Jennifer, but I will never forget." After Jennifer's funeral, I thought everything was over. But life, once again, has a way of testing people. A few days after Jennifer was buried, I received a letter from Brad's lawyer. The content of the letter kept me on my toes. Brad, before he died, left a will. In it, he claimed innocence of the financial fraud and actions I'd exposed. Instead, he blamed Jennifer, saying that she had been the one who had pushed everything, had used his feelings to manipulate him, and had participated in his nefarious activities. He even suggested that I was behind it, using Jennifer as a pawn to sabotage his career. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Brad was not only a traitor, but a coward, who even after his death was trying to smear Jennifer and me. But what shocked me most was the last paragraph of the letter, a list of names of everyone who had attended his wild parties. And it wasn't just my former colleagues, it was prominent figures in the business world. This list is a ticking time bomb. If it becomes public, it will not only further damage Brad's reputation, but it will also affect many others, even those not directly involved. I know I have power, but I also realize that it can have serious consequences if abused. While I was still deciding what to do with this information, Jennifer's mother, Elizabeth, came to visit. She brought a stack of documents with her, handwritten letters that Jennifer had recently written but had not yet sent. In them, Jennifer confessed everything, from how Brad manipulated her to how guilty she felt about hurting me and herself. One letter in particular stopped me in my tracks. In it, Jennifer wrote that she had learned she had contracted HIV from Brad, but had not faced it. "Robert, if you're reading this, I am probably gone. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I have never stopped loving you. I made mistakes, but my love for you was never fake." Reading these lines, I felt like something inside me had broken. I no longer felt angry, only regret. Jennifer was wrong, but she was also a victim of a cruel game that Brad had set up. I folded the letter, feeling like I had just closed a part of my past. After reading Jennifer's letters, I felt like I needed time to process everything. But the tragedy didn't end there. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, my phone rang. It was Charles, the private investigator I had hired to investigate Brad. His voice was urgent and tense. "Robert, I just received important information. You need to know this immediately," Charles said. I frowned. What's wrong?" "Brad and the people involved in the list you received. Some of the names have started to disappear. The police are investigating, but I think you need to be careful. This is not just a corporate scandal anymore. There are people who are willing to do anything to protect themselves." Charles's words sent a chill down my spine. I quickly reviewed the list Brad's lawyer had sent me. Some of the names belonged to powerful figures in business and politics. It occurred to me that my actions, though motivated by revenge against Brad, had now drawn me into a much more dangerous spiral. A few days later, as I was leaving my house, an unfamiliar car pulled up in front of my house. Two men in suits got out and approached me. "Mr. Robert, we need to talk to you," one of them said, his voice polite but firm. I looked at them, a sense of danger filling me. "What's going on?" We represent a group that is interested in the list you are holding. We advise you to be careful with this information. Some of the people on it do not want it to be made public. I realized I was being threatened. They didn't say it outright, but the intent was clear. If I didn't keep quiet, the consequences would go beyond warnings. It's my prerogative, I replied, trying to keep my cool. I'll decide what to do with this information. One of the men smirked. We just hope you make the right decision. For your own good. They left, leaving me standing there with a heavy heart. My revenge had led to a battle much larger than I had prepared for. Now I was facing not only personal trauma, but also forces willing to use any means to protect their secrets. A week later, I got a call from the police. One of the people on the list, a prominent figure in the financial industry, had been murdered. Investigators suspected that this was not a simple murder, but a conspiracy to silence the illegal activities on the list I was keeping. I realized I was in the middle of a spiral from which I could not escape. These secrets would not only shatter Brad's reputation, but could also destroy even darker networks of power. But I knew what I had to do. I decided to send this list to an independent investigative reporter and someone who could reveal the truth without being influenced by outside forces. Although this would put me in greater danger, I had no choice. The truth had to come out, and I was willing to face the consequences. Sending the list to an independent investigative journalist was like setting off a time bomb in the world of the powerful. I knew I couldn't control everything that would happen, but at least I did the right thing. After the list was released, a media sensation spread. Big names were on the front pages of major newspapers, and investigations and accusations followed. Those who had threatened me were now facing the consequences of their actions. But this also meant that I couldn't go back to my normal life. I had to sell my house, change jobs, and leave the city for safety. At first, I thought giving it all up was a big sacrifice, but then I realized that sometimes starting over is the only way to find yourself. I moved to a small town by the sea, where I could live in peace and away from the storms of the past. Here I started working as a freelance technology consultant, spending more time taking care of myself. I took yoga classes, read books, and often took long walks on the beach, feeling the stillness I'd lost during the turbulent years. One day, while sitting in a small cafe by the sea, a woman walked in. She smiled at me as she passed, a simple smile that made me feel warm. After a few random encounters, we started talking. Her name was Sophia, an artist looking for inspiration for her new collection of paintings. Her gentleness and honesty made me feel safe, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Sophia didn't ask much about my past, but she listened when I decided to tell her. I didn't hide what I'd been through, from the pain of betrayal to the tragedy of Jennifer. Instead of looking at me with pity, she simply said, "We can't change the past, but we can choose to let it not define our future." Those words made me realize that, despite my painful past, I was no longer the man living in its shadow. I had come a long way, facing the demons in my life, and now I was ready to move on. A year later, I stood on the beach, looking out at the vast ocean. The setting sun dyed the sky orange and pink. Sophia walked up to me and took my hand. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. I smiled, squeezing her hand. "I think about what I've been through, and about all that lies ahead. My journey of revenge and the tragedies I have endured are not things I want to forget. They are part of my story, but they no longer define me. I have learned to let go, to forgive, not only those who have hurt me, but also myself." In the sunset, I felt a peace that I had been searching for all along. Life may not be perfect, but I had found meaning again. And most of all, I knew that I could love and trust again. My journey was not over. It had only just begun.